Okay, we're now going to be checking that our cuff and the lower part of our sleeve match up and how much is going to be going into each pleat. So when we look at our cuff, we can see on the placket goes to the outside, and the amount that overlaps is usually shown when we look at the top of the placket. And when I measure this, it's 1.5. So I've marked in 1.5 to show the area under the placket where the piping is, and this area is necessary so that the cuff can actually fasten, so that there's an overlap. So what we know is that our cuff starts at the edge of this line. I'm going to mark this line with the highlighter to make it clear for you. So we know that one part of our cuff finishes in line with the piping that's under the placket. So I'm marking where the side seam would be. The two side seams, underseams, would be connected. So I'll move to the other side. And I'm coming, marking to the end of the placket where the cuff would finish if there were no pleats. If there weren't any pleats on this sleeve, the cuff would need to be 4.2 centimetres longer. So that tells us that there's 4.2 centimetres spread over two pleats. Now I've looked at the pleats and the pleats seem quite equal. You must check this because they're not always. Sometimes you might have a bigger pleat and then a smaller one, but in this case they're both equal. So that tells us that each pleat has 2.1 centimetres in it. Just to recap how we worked out the positioning of the pleats is that I measured from the edge of the placket to where the pleat finished, and that was 4 centimetres. I'm going to mark this with the highlighter so that you can see more clearly. And from the underseam on the sleeve, measuring that area through to, get a hold of it, to the end of the second pleat is 12 centimetres. So we measured in to 12 centimetres and marked it. So this lets us know that the pleat is 2.1 centimetres in this direction and 2.1 centimetres coming in from the other side. The pleats are facing, they're going in the direction to the placket, so we want a little arrow that's letting us know the direction of the pleat, and it's usually helpful if we write that it's a pleat. I'm actually going to mark on the cuff where the pleats would match, just because this is really helpful to know that I haven't made any mistakes and that all my measurements line up and are correct. There's no difference in the actual sewing of when it comes to putting the cuff onto the sleeve because it's symmetrical, and the notches are there just for our guidance to know that our pattern is correct, and as also a safety net to know that we're taking the right amount into our pleats. Okay, so that's that area now complete. Okay, so we've come back to the yoke area. Now, if you can recall, I mentioned that there was slight bobbling and waving at the connection between the back yoke and the main body. Now that I'm looking at the pattern piece, I can see that this was probably caused by, there was quite a lot of dart suppression into the armhole, which meant that the back piece had a significant curve on it. So that would be on the main back body. The reason that we know that the curve is on the body and not on the yoke is because of the stripes. We can see on our garment that there's a clean stripe coming all the way through the bottom of the yoke. So that tells us that the bottom of our yoke is a completely straight line, and that all of the curve for the shaping around the back shoulder blades has got to be in the main body. So the fact that we've got this bubbling, very slight sort of easing appearance, although it can't possibly be easing, I think that that's due to there being a significant dart suppression through the back armhole. So when we're looking back at the draft as we copied the garment, is that I've drawn a line where the back of the yoke, I'm just marking it to make it clearer. So where the back of the yoke was lining up, and I've squared it off from that position to its end position. So that tells me exactly where the yoke was. Now this, we can see, I shall just mark a little bit in pink to let you see where the dotted lines were of the draft. We can see that that was the line when we went through with our tracing wheel. Now this is making quite a point at the centre back for the main body, which is highly unlikely. It will be fabric distortion from when it was being pinned out. Now you can't always avoid this because you don't know what you're going to get until you actually lift the garment away from the paper. So if you ever see it, you just have to work out what you think most likely caused it, and then how to adjust your pattern to adapt to it. Now my back, I'm thinking that I want to line up with the pink dots. So I'm squaring off from this position, and then I know that I'm going to curve down, coming closer to the pink dots. So my back body line would be the pink line. So you can see I have a loss of almost a centimetre in this area. So I double checked my shirt to see if I had the correct centre back length, and I did. So that tells me that I need to add that centimetre back onto the bottom. As I was pinning, it must have been pulled upwards because there wasn't a seam at the centre back, so the fabric is more vulnerable. So that when I actually create my final pattern, I'm adding what was lost in this area onto the bottom, and I will reshape the bottom hem. Is that anytime that we're copying a garment, we always twirl it to double check that it's everything that we would like it to be, and any adjustments can be made at that stage. The other thing that we need to check is the amount that's going into the back dart. Now, on our draft, at its widest point, it appears to be 1.3 centimetres. Now, because this garment was a stripe, we are able to tell exactly how much went into the dart at its widest position by following the lines. We can see that it was to the side of the lighter brown stripe and to the edge of the darker orange stripe, and this is 2 centimetres. So I can see that I don't have enough in the back dart, I need another sort of 7mm added to the side seam, which will straighten up this edge. I'm looking to see the distance from the centre of where each end of the dart appeared. Here it's 14.5, and here we have 14.9. I'm actually going to make them both the distance from the centre back of the larger measurement, because I'm also going to make the dart itself wider. So I'm measuring to 14.9 in this position, and I'm going to draw a line between the two. And so then in the approximate centre of the dart, we can see where the wider area was. It was here. On a man's shirt, this is not such a defined point as it would be on a lady's shirt, because a lady's shirt would be for a slimmer waist and a more defined waist. So I'm marking the 2 centimetres. I'm marking in either direction about 3 centimetres, whereas on a lady's shirt I would be working from the absolute waist point, and then I'm going to bend inwards. And so this will be my new dart. Okay, I'm going to go over that with a highlighter. So I've now made a decision of where my back length will be, the shape of my yoke, and the width of the back of my body. I'm going to copy the back yoke. The back yoke is a single piece. It doesn't have a seam in the middle, so I like to make my pattern piece in a single piece. Is that if an area is quite narrow, like a collar or a yoke, you can be more accurate in creating your pattern piece if you draw a longer line, because any discrepancies would be over a wider area. So I'm going to make the line clearer where I'm copying from, so that I know that I will be more accurate. I'm pinning my pattern paper into position. I'm not going to put seam allowance or anything on it yet, because I've not checked to see if my shoulders match and if my sleeve fits into my armhole, to see if there's anything that needs to change. I'm now going to check and see if my front and back bodies match each other, and if there's any minor adjustments that need to be made to make them fit. So at the beginning of our pattern, I pointed out the fact that I always like to cross over my line so I know where the absolute end is. So I am drawing a line in each position, and I'm going to lay one on top of the other and see if they match. Okay, so when I'm looking at this, I can see that there's a minor discretion. I'm going to make the decision to actually go with the deeper armhole. So I will be altering the back shirt to match the front. I'm going to also put a notch in part way down the side seam to approximately the waist area. So I'm marking my notch and then lining up the side seams again. And there's a small alteration here to make the two match. Now it's always important to go through any pattern when you copied a garment or made any alterations to double check that everything goes together. Now I'm looking at the shoulder seams, lining them up to see if they go together. Now again, there's a very small discrepancy of about 4 millimeters. Now at this stage I can't actually tell whether that amount should be added to the inside neck or the outside neck. So whether it's at the inside neck position where the extra needs adding, or whether it's at the outside shoulder where the shoulder meets the sleeve. So I'm actually going to add it to the outside edge. This is where it's most likely to be from, but also the fact is that it's better to actually make a piece bigger than it is to actually be reducing a piece, because is that when we've made our toile and we're doing fittings, it's easier to make adjustments where we're then taking something away than when we don't have enough fabric and it's causing the garments to drag or distort. I'm straightening the shoulder line and I'm going to mark a notch towards the neck so that when we're sewing our garment we know where to meet, and also it gives a defined point for when we are trying to work out exactly where the two shoulders meet when we're toiling, so that we'll know that it isn't any discrepancies in cutting out or sewing. If the notches match, it will let us know that if it fit properly, that we added the excess at the right point. If the shoulders aren't sitting as well as we would like, we can undo our shoulder and reposition it, and we'll be able to tell from our notch exactly how much we needed to move it to make it fit properly. Okay, so now you can see that I drew the line in that would be the beginnings of the front shoulder when I drew where the two pattern pieces met. I didn't just do a little tiny mark, I actually did a length of a line so I can tell the direction of which that line wants to follow. So I'll now just draw it in. So I know that my underarm creates a nice smooth shape, and when my shoulders connect I have a fluid shape also, so there is nothing that should make my sleeve not sit correctly. This additional amount needs to be added to our back yoke. And I'm just double checking that when I place the new pattern piece on the new yoke pattern piece onto the main body and allow it to follow the same line, that I do still get a really nice fluid line, and I do. So I'm happy with my armhole. I would then fold my paper over so that I can make a complete pattern. Double check that I am at right angles at the centre back, and I am the same for the back neck, so that I know that I won't have any V's when it's opened up. It will be a lovely straight line. Now we need to check if our sleeve matches our armhole. When we copy a shirt sleeve, there is a tendency, due to the curve here, that this last little area may have stretched slightly. So we need to check and make sure that our sleeve isn't too big for our armhole. I'm going to start with the front and laying them stitch line onto stitch line. And I'm marking it. I'm putting a little F there to let me know that that was marked in the front. And then I will do the same with my back body. Okay. So I'm now checking the back sleeve, which is the green line, onto the back armhole. I'm able to do this straight off the draft rather than working it as two pieces. And I can mark the position of where the back sleeve would come to. So this actually tells me at the moment that my sleeve is about 1 centimetre bigger than my armhole. Now for a shirt sleeve, that's too much. They would either be the same measurement, or you would maybe have 5 millimetres. You can see that there is a little bit of ease as the machinist has put the sleeve in, turning the corner, but it's too much. You can also recall that when we were lining up to the centre line, we had this little triangle too much. So if it was that amount when it was to the line, if we measure it, that's like, it's 2.5 to 3 millimetres. So it would be the same amount the other side. So we're looking that we know that we have a potential of 5 to 6 millimetres too much. So the only place that we can remove it from is from under the arm where the seam is, because we can't possibly take it out through the centre. We know that if this is where the front finishes and this is where the back finishes, the shoulder line should be totally in the centre of those two markers. So we'll now recheck the sleeve working from the centre outwards, and then this will tell us how much we need to take from the sides. Okay, we'll do the back first. And then we would check the front. So the excess can be taken from the sides. We will place a notch in the front armhole. So we have a single notch in the front. And we'll want a double notch in the back, so that it becomes easily identifiable which is the front of the sleeve and which is the back of the sleeve, so that we never sew them in the wrong way round. Carrying on, put the new mark of where the yoke would line up now that the sleeve has been reduced. Okay, so we have now checked that our body matches from the side, that our shoulders match, that we have a smooth shaped neckline, that our sleeve fits into our armhole correctly, and that our cuff fits onto the bottom of our sleeve. Now, the final process would be to check that our collar, that the two pieces match each other, and that the collar fits into the neck. Just to recap, that we've created our separate pattern piece for our back yoke, and that we've done the adjustments that were made when we lined up the shoulders. The thing that's missing is the notch. So I'm just going to put that in. It's important to check through your work and make sure that you don't miss any stages or information onto each piece. So now I can set the yoke piece, the sleeve and the cuff to one side, and I'm going to check to see if the collar stand fits into the neck. So I'll start at the back neck. I'm making a mark where the fold was at the center position for when we folded the copied piece in half. And I'm going to lay stitch line onto stitch line and take it around the back neck. I'm marking in where the shoulder line is. I then need to place that mark onto the shoulder line for the front pattern piece. And I will again check with stitch line on top of stitch line, the slip. And it matches exactly. If there was a minor discretion, I would go to the slightly bigger one because it's easier to alter afterwards. So now that I know that my collar stand fits my neck, I'm going to double check to make sure that my collar fits my collar stand. So I created a line here to let me know where the collar started. So I'm lining them up and I'm going stitch line onto stitch line. And there's about a millimetre discrepancy. So I think that it's more likely that the fold position was correct. And actually when I've drawn the line through, I can see that it was pretty much sort of a millimetre or less discrepancy, the width of a pencil line. So I think as I would have been tracing around the collar, it's more likely that it was the width of my pencil line from this side as I drew around the piece. But it's so minor. So I'm just taking a fraction off that end. I'm going to check to make sure that I'm squared off. Again, you can see that my line through the centre back goes past the actual pattern piece. It gives me a longer line which allows me to be more accurate when I'm squaring off. Okay, the collars are lining up nice and square. Now, just as a general rule that I follow when I'm creating collars, is that I always do a double notch between the collar stand and the collar itself. This particular style of collar is easily identifiable, but there are collars that aren't, where they have half stands, and it's easy to actually stitch things in upside down. So if it becomes your habit to always do a double notch between the collar and the collar stand, this is a mistake that you're unlikely to ever make. When you choose where to put the double notch, try and not have it directly opposite the single notch that lets you know where the shoulder is, because if at any point you made a mistake when you were cutting out and hadn't done both notches, is that you could find yourself in a position of actually stitching it in upside down. So I'm choosing to put my double notch towards the back. I'm transferring that double notch onto the collar itself, and now my collar is complete. So when we're looking at the shirt, we can see that this shirt has got a pleated placket. There are many different ways of finishing the front of a shirt. When we're initially just checking to see if our body shape is correct, I tend to just add 5 centimeters onto the outer edge to be able to be folded back to make both of the fronts strong, so that I can decide if my body shape is right before I actually do any additional work on detailing. So all I would do is I would be adding 5 centimeters, which is more than I would actually tend to need for a shirt, but it leaves me the options of trying out different types of plackets when I'm working on the stand. So I would fold this area back so that I could trace my neck shape. I'm checking that I'm squared off at the bottom. I can see that the initial sample was raising upwards, so I don't want that to continue into my first toile, so I'm squaring that part off. I had added the additional amount at the bottom that was possibly lost here if I hadn't just stretched the fabric a little, so I'm going to add that on, because I can always trim it off if I think, when I'm looking at it on the stand or on a person, if I think it looks too long, I can take it away. Okay, so our back pattern piece will be working from this pink line. And I would then just be adding seam allowance. I'll just put the seam allowances on the back to show you how I would work. The hem of our shirt is quite small, so it's only a centimetre hem. So I've added a centimetre onto the bottom of the pattern for the shirt hem, because we can see that the shirt hem is actually, it's double turn, but it's quite narrow, and because it's on a curve, is that you couldn't possibly do a big hem, because the fabric would twist too much. So our final recap, we've double checked that our back and front fit through the side seams and the shoulders, and that we have a smooth shape in our underarms and in our neck. We've checked that we still had a nice shape when we attach our back yoke onto our back body. We have checked that our sleeve fits into our armhole and that our cuff fits onto the bottom of our sleeve. And we have checked that our collar pieces match each other and fit into the neck correctly. So we would now put seam allowances onto all our pattern pieces, cut them out and create our first toile.